California has always lived with earthquakes. The state's identity is inseparable from tectonic danger, with the ever-looming threat of the big one. For more than a century, one fault has dominated public imagination and scientific attention alike: the San Andreas Fault. It is portrayed as the single defining crack that holds California's fate in its jagged grip. But deep beneath deserts, valleys, and mountain fronts east of the Sierra Nevada, a far less famous system of faults is quietly doing something extraordinary. It is not just producing earthquakes. It is not just relieving tectonic stress. It is slowly reorganizing how the western edge of North America moves. This region is known as the Walker Lane, and according to a growing body of geological evidence, it may represent the early stages of a tectonic shift that could one day rival the San Andreas itself. This is not a sudden rupture or a catastrophic break unfolding before our eyes. It is something far more unsettling, a slow, persistent tearing that unfolds over millions of years, hidden in plain sight. Most people have never heard of this fault system, and it is absorbing more and more of the immense force between tectonic plates, hinting that California's future earthquakes may not come from where we expect. Today, let's delve into the hidden tectonic shift underway beneath California. Don't forget to click on that subscribe button and like this video, as it's the best way to support this channel. California's geological story begins far beneath its cities, mountains, and deserts, where two massive slabs of Earth's crust are locked in constant motion. The Pacific Plate is sliding northwestward past the North American Plate at a rate of several centimeters per year. Over human lifetimes, this movement is imperceptible, but over millions of years, it reshapes entire continents. For much of recent geological history, this sideways motion has been concentrated along the San Andreas Fault, a single, well-defined fracture that has come to symbolize California's seismic danger. Yet the San Andreas is no longer carrying this burden alone. A significant portion of plate motion is now being absorbed farther east, across a broad and complex zone known as the Walker Lane. Walker Lane is not a single fault, but a broad zone of deformation, roughly 100 kilometers wide, composed of dozens of interconnected strike-slip and normal faults. Unlike the sharply defined San Andreas, the Walker Lane spreads motion across a network of fractures that collectively accommodate crustal movement. This system runs along the eastern edge of the Sierra Nevada and into Nevada's Basin and Range Province, forming a transitional zone between two very different tectonic regimes. Geologically, the Walker Lane acts as a shear zone, meaning it allows blocks of crust to slide past one another horizontally. However, it also hosts vertical motion, where crust stretches and drops, forming valleys and uplifting mountain ranges. This hybrid behavior makes it uniquely complex and, in many ways, more dynamic than a single through-going fault. Over millions of years, that complexity has allowed it to quietly absorb an increasing share of tectonic strain once concentrated farther west. Geological evidence increasingly indicates that the Walker Lane is not a static feature, but a fault system growing more influential with time. Studies of offset landforms, volcanic layers, and ancient sediment deposits reveal that slip rates across parts of the Walker Lane have increased over the last several million years. Faults that once behaved independently are now gradually linking together, forming longer and more continuous pathways capable of transferring greater amounts of tectonic stress. This process, known as fault localization, is a defining characteristic of emerging plate boundaries and suggests the system is becoming more organized rather than dissipating. Central to this evolution is the behavior of the Sierra Nevada. Once considered a stable anchor within California's crust, the range is now understood to act as a rigid block that is slowly moving northwestward in concert with the Pacific Plate. Instead of cutting directly through this massive mountain range, tectonic stress is increasingly being diverted around its eastern edge, where it feeds directly into the Walker Lane fault system. In effect, the Sierra Nevada may already be riding with the Pacific Plate, while deformation is concentrated farther east. Beyond the Walker Lane lies the Basin and Range Province, one of the most tectonically stretched regions on Earth. Over tens of millions of years, the crust here has been pulled apart, creating a landscape of alternating mountain ranges and valleys. This prolonged extension weakens the crust, making it far more susceptible to faulting and structural reorganization. The Walker Lane exploits this weakened geologic fabric. As strike-slip motion interacts with ongoing extension, faults are able to rotate, connect, and evolve more rapidly than they would in stronger, more intact crust. Nevada's geology therefore acts as fertile ground for a developing plate boundary, encouraging the Walker Lane to widen and strengthen rather than fade away. Together, these processes point to a slow but profound reorganization of the western plate boundary. The Walker Lane is no stranger to earthquakes. Historically, it has produced some of the largest continental earthquakes in the western United States, outside California's coastal fault systems. Events like the 1932 Cedar Mountain earthquake in Nevada, with a magnitude exceeding 7, revealed that faults in this region are capable of releasing enormous amounts of energy. More recent earthquake sequences near the California-Nevada border have further reinforced this concern. These events often involve complex, multi-fault ruptures, exactly the kind of behavior expected in a system that is in the process of linking itself into something larger. What makes this especially concerning is predictability. Unlike the San Andreas, which has been mapped, monitored, and studied in extraordinary detail, the Walker Lane remains poorly understood. Many of its faults are buried. Others cut through sparsely populated desert regions where historical records are limited. This makes assessing future seismic risk far more difficult. The idea that the San Andreas Fault could someday be replaced sounds sensational, but it is rooted in well-established plate tectonic principles. Major faults do not persist indefinitely if they become inefficient at accommodating motion. If another pathway allows stress to be released more easily, the plate boundary can migrate. In the deep geological past, California's tectonic regime has already undergone several dramatic reorganizations. Subduction zones vanished, new transform faults emerged, entire microplates were captured and rearranged. The Walker Lane may represent the early stages of another such transition. Estimates suggest that roughly a quarter of the plate motion, once carried almost entirely by the San Andreas, is now distributed across the Walker Lane. That number has grown over time, indicating a gradual transfer of tectonic responsibility. There would be no single moment when the San Andreas shuts off. Instead, slip would gradually diminish there while increasing elsewhere. Over millions of years, the locus of plate motion could shift eastward. If the Walker Lane continues to evolve, the long-term consequences for California are staggering. Regions that are currently considered tectonic backwaters could become the sites of future megaquakes. Infrastructure built with coastal faults in mind may be unprepared for hazards emerging far inland. Cities in eastern California and western Nevada already sit atop active fault systems, but public awareness lags far behind reality. The popular image of California splitting into the ocean ignores a far more subtle and plausible scenario: California being gradually reassembled along new tectonic seams. This is not a disaster story with an imminent countdown clock. It is a story of inevitability on geological timescales, a reminder that continents are not permanent and that plate boundaries are restless, adaptive systems. One of the most dangerous aspects of the Walker Lane is psychological rather than geological. Because its evolution unfolds slowly, it does not inspire the same urgency as an overdue earthquake on a famous fault. Yet history shows that some of Earth's most transformative changes occur quietly, accumulating stress until thresholds are crossed. The future of California's tectonic landscape will not be defined by a single earthquake or a sudden rupture, but by a slow and persistent shift in how the Earth releases stress along the western edge of North America. Evidence increasingly suggests that the Walker Lane will continue to grow in importance, gradually absorbing a larger share of motion between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. This does not mean the San Andreas Fault will suddenly fall silent, but it may no longer dominate the system as completely as it once did. Over the coming millions of years, faults within the Walker Lane are likely to become more interconnected, capable of producing larger and more complex earthquakes. Seismic hazard may increasingly shift eastward, affecting regions that have historically received far less attention than California's coastal cities. Advances in GPS monitoring, satellite imagery, and seismic imaging will continue to refine scientists' understanding of this evolving system, but uncertainty will remain an unavoidable part of the picture. The long-term outlook is not one of continental breakup or dramatic ocean formation, but of steady geological transformation. California's future will be shaped by motion that never stops, quiet, relentless, and powerful enough to redraw the tectonic map of the American West.